Welcome back to PTL's Fantasy Minute, where with the last week of fantasy upon us, I wanted to do something a little bit special for everybody trying to seize the title of their own fantasy leagues at home. Now, instead of just doing the regular studs, duds, and risky picks this week, we're going to be lining up in LCS order, all the way from the top down to the bottom lane, trying to take a look at the best, the worst, and who you probably want to pick if you want to try to win those leagues. So now that we're all lined up and ready to go, let's kick it off in the top lane. We're going to have a couple of interesting options here. First off, Expect has risen to the top of top laners in fantasy, and he's going up against Vitality and Fnatic this week. So as G2 continue to dominate, as will Expect. Darshan, on the other hand, has been floating at the bottom of the fantasy table for top laners for a while. Although he has decent matchups against NRG and Apex, he's still predicted to get a low amount of points. So you might want to try somebody like Ray from Apex. CLG is one of his matches, the other one is against Team Liquid. In Apex, they need to win if they want to make playoffs. So Ray, he's going to be trying to put up a lot of fantasy points for his team. Let's move down to the jungle. These guys may or may not be helping your top laners score a lot of points. Reignover, one of the leading junglers anyway, in North America, has the most fantasy points per game. Against TSM, it's a little difficult, but he's also got a match against Phoenix 1, where Immortals are probably expected to win and put up a lot of fantasy points doing it. Over in Europe, though, Amazing for Origin hasn't really been performing up to par. They're against Splyce and H2K, two of the top table teams in the league, and Origin, unfortunately, isn't going to be making playoffs anytime soon, so Amazing may want to take a seat on your bench. Although somebody who, unlike his name, has not been playing very Trashy from Splyce has some good matchups this week. Origin and Unicorns of Love. Splyce is at the top of the tables in Europe, and he's a sleeper pick in fantasy, as not a lot of guys out there are picking him up for their fantasy teams, so you might want to try your luck with Trashy. Mid laners, these guys, well, the whole map revolves around them because they're in the middle of everything. Pobelter, I think we might be seeing a trend with Immortals players here, has been putting up a lot of fantasy points, and much like Reignover, these guys are going to be doing pretty well this week. Power of Evil, like his teammate Amazing, has, well, not been amazing in fantasy. If you're going up against Splyce and H2K, you probably want to stay away from him, but much like his Splyce jungler Trashy, Senkux has the same matchups and is probably going to be putting up a large amount of fantasy points. So if you're one of those people that are sticking to Power of Evil, you might want to switch to Senkux. Let's switch our focus down into the bottom lane where, shocking surprise, we got another Immortals player who has been the most fantasy points for their position. This time it's Wild Turtle. Now, one of the things I've tried to hammer this into you guys. For some reason, 60% of you still own this guy. More than half of that are still playing this guy, and I kind of just have to rain on your parade. Piglet's not coming back this week, so don't start him. He's got a 0 for fantasy points. You don't want a 0 if you want to win fantasy. Instead, play Kabi. I think this is like the 4th week in a row I've been telling you guys to play Kabi on Splyce. He's one of the top fantasy AD carries and still only has about a 40% ownership rate. So that's the sleeper pick you want if you want to win your leagues. But with every AD carry comes a support. And shock and surprise, it's Adrian who's going to be putting up the most fantasy points per game for a support player. So if you guys, for some reason, there's like 10% of you that don't own Adrian, you might be able to pick him up in your league, most likely not. However, if you've been holding on to Aphromoo, despite his matchups against NRG and Apex this week kind of being ones that they probably should win, his fantasy points per game have been on the low end. If you're looking at somebody that's gonna steal that win in your fantasy league, look to Giants and look to Hustlin'. They're against Schalke and Roccat, and Giants have been performing steadily, improving and improving. They're kind of at the top of the table in Europe, and they're looking to cruise into the playoffs. These are matchups that they should be able to put up a decent amount of fantasy points in. Now, that's going to be it for fantasy, and that means it's going to be it for me for a while. So I wanted to give a big thanks to everybody out there who's participated on the fantasy forums and continue to do so because I'll continue to be offer advice over there. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the studs, duds, and risky picks little tweak this week, and hopefully you guys will win your fantasy leagues out there.